Hello and welcome back. Well, I'm going to do another inlay bowl. This one's going to be a bit of a different type of inlay approach. And I'm using this piece of wood here, and I have no idea what it is, but if I do find out, I'll put it up there on the screen. Now, I've already been on the bandsaw and cut it out round. I've marked a center on the other side here. That's where the worm screw will go in. And you can see it's not a very thick piece of wood, so the height of the bowl is not very high, but that's fine for this type of bowl that we're going to do, which is going to be quite a wide rim, and the inlays are going to go in the rim, and I will cut away the bottom here a bit. Well, that's the plan anyway. Step number one is to drill a 8mm hole in here for the worm screw. Chuck goes onto the lathe, the worm screw goes into the chuck, then I can wind the piece of wood onto the worm screw. Now this is quite a large diameter piece of wood, and I do not trust the worm screw by itself, so I have the tailstock up here for more support. The first thing I need to do is to get it round and in balance so that I can get the speed up a bit higher. So we're making progress here, still a bit more to do, and I'm going to flatten the bottom off here a little bit. After a bit more turning, I've taken the tailstock away and just cleaning this part here up. But you can see here that I've cut a 70mm tenon, and I've also shaped the foot here a bit as well. I won't show all the turning because it can be a little bit time consuming and boring. But here I am getting the shape the way I want it, and I'm using some shear scraping here just to smooth it out a little bit. It's roughly the shape that I want, but I have some issues here in the wood, and I want to address these issues before we get much further into this turning. What I'm going to do is put sanding sealer on here, and then I'll use some glue to glue up these holes and cracks. The sanding sealer seals the end grains, and I do put a generous amount on here. Once the sanding sealer is dry, I start putting some glue in some of the cracks and some of the holes. And this one here, I have no idea what it is like under the wood, but this was just drinking the glue. I just hope that it's not really bad under there and there's a big cavity or something like that. Then I put a bit of activator on to set the glue. I now have the bowl switched around, it's in a chuck, and I'm cleaning off the surface. And when I clean that off, I did see some more cracks in there, and since the inlays are going in on the edge, I don't want the wood to split when I put the inlays in. So I've put some glue on here, and I'm going to just leave this overnight to set, and hopefully all that glue that I put in that other large cavity should be set by tomorrow as well. Well, it's the next day and the glue looks pretty good on there. So now I put the indexing plate on the lathe and I screw on the chuck with the bowl in the chuck, and once that's tightened down, that holds that indexing plate in place. Now, working out your indexing spacing is the more, I guess, challenging part. And you can see here I've drawn some lines on the bowl here, and that's where the plugs are going to go in the side of the rim here. Now I need 36 holes, and I've put them at step 1. So that means on the indexing plate, set it to 36, and then every time we drill a hole, we go round one hole to the next hole. Now if I didn't have a row of 36 holes in the indexing plate, and I had 72 holes, I could use the 72 holes, but I would go step 2, so I'd go 2 holes apart, if that makes sense. But I find it best to write all that stuff down because you don't want to get confused when you start drilling the holes and then drill a hole in the wrong place. Now the plan here is to use 3 different woods. So 1 wood, 2 woods, and a 3rd wood here. And then once we get to the 4th one, we're going to go back to the 1st wood we used, and then we'll go around like that. And hopefully that would look pretty good. I'm setting up the drilling jig here. Now I've already paralleled the drill bit with the banjo, and then I use a square to go off the lathe bed to the banjo. but I also need to line the drill bit up with the centre line. But that's the centre line there. Now I've made this rim quite thick, and that's because I don't want any wood splitting when I start knocking in the inlays. I can always turn away the wood later on, so it's better to be more on the thick side than too thin. Then we start the drilling process. I think I was going in about 40 millimeters here. The index is turned around, drilled again, and we just go all the way around the bowl like this. So I'm indexing just one indexing segment at a time, and I'm using 36 indexing places. So we get all the way around, and then the last couple of holes to drill out, and that's the drilling complete. Now I need to work on making the inlays. This is European ash, and I cut a piece off about 45 millimeters long, and this is purple heart, and I cut about the same length off here. I also have some walnut that I cut up as well. Then we start drilling out the inlay plugs. This is 8 millimeter. This one comes out pretty easy. The ash. This is the purple heart. Harder wood. The inlay got a little bit stuck in there, but I got it out in the end. And then this is the walnut. That comes out pretty easily from the top. That's the first walnut plug, 11 more to go, and then we've finished the plugs. Now we put a little bit of glue on the plugs, and then they're knocked into place. And you'll see here on the bowl itself, I've got AWP, so that's ash, walnut, purple heart. And like other steps in this job, it's always best to write this down so you don't make some silly mistake and put the wrong plug in the wrong hole. Anyway, that's done all the way around, and this is the last plug to install, and that is pretty much done. That gets put back onto the lathe. I've got a towel down there to stop any glue dripping down. I'm going to leave that overnight, and then we're going to come back tomorrow and we can finish turn this bowl. The first step is to knock off these dowels or inlays as close as you can to the rim of the bowl. And that's because there's less chance to break off one of these inside the bowl when they're short. Then the rim is cleaned up with a 35-degree bowl gouge. And that looks pretty good to start with. I then do more work on the back, and these are pretty much the finishing cuts. I've got the shape that I want, and I'm using some shear scraping cuts here to smooth out the bottom of the bowl. I use the power sander with 80 grit sandpaper to sand the outside of the bowl. Now there are a few cracks and holes in here, another sort of ding dong there, and over here as well. I really want to tidy those up. So what I do is apply some sanding sealer. This seals the end grain, and it also stops the glue that's going to be put in the cracks from changing the colour of the wood. I glued those up off camera and left them overnight, and you can see there even that one's done. Then I give the outside another sand with some 80 grit, and those came up pretty good, I think. Well, probably the best given the state of the wood. I sand through all the grits, power sanding, and then the next grit I use hand sanding, and that's the last grit there, 400. So the outside of the bowl's pretty much done. The next step is to hollow out the inside of the bowl. Again, a 35-degree bowl gouge. This wood is pretty hard, so I had to keep sharpening the bowl gouge there. Once you get down a little bit, you start to see the inlays coming through. There are some cracks in here, but I think they're going to be turned away. You keep chiseling away until you get the shape that you want that matches the outside. Then I use a scraper just to get rid of some of the chisel marks. And I find this part really important. I've got a little hump here. You can hardly feel it, but it's really important to get rid of it because your fingers can feel very small humps and valleys. I think it goes down to a 1 thou or 2 thou or something like that. So yeah, you really need to make sure that there's absolutely nothing here and it's really smooth. There's a few marks down there, so I'll deal with those off camera. I have the shape matching the outside now, so it's all finished. Now there are cracks in here on the inside, so they need to be addressed as well. I'm going to put sanding sealer on and glue those up. Now the camera's probably not in the best place here because my arm's in the way, but I put a nice liberal dose of sanding sealer on there, and this may give you a clue of what the bowl will look like once it's finished. I do wipe some of the excess sanding sealer away with a paper towel. I've glued up the cracks and they came out pretty good, and I've finished sand everything on this side of the bowl as well. So this is ready to be turned around and put on the vacuum plate so I can take the tenon off. I'm using a 35-degree bowl gouge here to remove the tenon. And you can see I'm cutting in towards the bowl, so I'm putting all the force in instead of across the bowl. I've taken away the tailstock and just getting rid of the little nub here, then that's all tidied up. It is important to make sure it's a little concave there so that the bowl sits properly on the table. Then I go through all the grits, first with the power sander and then with hand sanding until I've gone all the way up to 400 grit, which is ready for a finish. I turn the vacuum cleaner off and the bowl drops down like that, and that's pretty much done. The final step is the finish, and I'm using a spray lacquer on this bowl. I spray the top of the bowl. Once that's dried, I turn that over and spray the bottom of the bowl. There's a still shot of the top of the bowl, and I think those inlays look pretty good. They look like little droplets that are dripping into the bowl. On the bottom of the bowl you can see a little bit of the inlays there as well, which is nice. That's pretty much the bowl finished, and I'll be taking this down on Wednesday night to the show and tell at the Woodturners Club. Well, I guess that was a little bit of a different approach to the other inlays I've done, but all in all it was still a fun little project. I hope everyone has a great day, and once again, thanks for watching.